Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mysteries of life. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, joining you from the lands of the Alsatian-speaking peoples of the Okanagan Nations, where I live on our garlic farm on the outskirts of a small town known as Summerland, BC. I have a magical story for you today. It's about grief and loss and receiving signs from our ancestors. My guest today is Corey MacAuliffe. She holds a PhD in social and behavioral health sciences and a master's in public health. And she's also the author of 23 Dates with My Dead Dad, a grief memoir that chronicles her journey toward reconnecting with her late father and healing from intergenerational trauma. After her father's death in 2019, Corey transformed their monthly father-daughter tradition into a spiritual practice, tuning into synchronicities and signs. The book weaves together her experiences with chronic illness, ancestral trauma, and a transformative trip to Ireland to explore her family history. And for many of us, the holiday season is a time of bittersweet memories and melancholy reminiscences. And one thing I really appreciated about Corey's book is that it offers a balance of the practical, actual lived reality of a complicated relationship with a parent, balanced with the excitement and the uplifting energy of asking for signs from the universe and tuning in to synchronicities and receiving those little winks. It was a real page turner. So if you're looking for a memoir that's kind of like one part Eat, Pray, Love and one part traveling with pomegranates, and then like kind of sprinkled with a dash of visiting a medium to connect with your beloved dead, then have I got a book for you. Welcome to the show, Corey. Let's start with the traditional question. What identities do you lead with?
Thanks so much for asking me that. I would say that I come today being a white settler woman of cisgender heteronormative identities in the lands of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. My identities also come from a lot of different European identities, with probably the most prominent being Irish, as well as Northern Irish and Scottish, and a chunk over in Swiss Italian components as well. My identities are also as someone who lives with episodic disability and chronic illness, and trying to live in the liminal space betwixt and between that is ever changing. I also feel that I come with the identities of a scientist and researcher that also lives in the metaphysical ethereal realm. And so it often feels like I'm living in two different worlds, but as I describe in my book, I very much have now, thankfully, learned that they are one. I just am often feeling like a bridge builder to help people get from one to the other.
So set the scene for us so that we get the context of your book here. Tell us a bit about your dad. What were some of the best parts of having him as a parent, and what were some of the hardest parts?
For sure. As a small child, so I am the youngest. I have two older sisters. And as the youngest of three children, I think my dad realized at that point he was going to miss out on childhood if he did not start showing up a bit more. And he was involved in my sister's lives as well. But I would say my dad was my best friend. I would not claim that I was his best friend, but he was definitely my best friend when I was little. And I adored spending time with him. So even he was a traveling salesman. And so even when he'd be getting ready for his trip or coming back from his trip, you would find me sitting they had a closet in between their main bedroom and their bathroom. And so you'd find me sitting there, and he'd pay me 10 cents for shining each of his shoes. And I would shine them all just mainly so I could be around him. And you would find him ironing. That's what he did constantly. So I spent a lot of time next to him as he ironed all of his clothes and got them ready. But I also got to spend every third Saturday with him one-on-one solo. My dad took my sisters and I shopping most typically. Every once in a while, it was to go down to visit our family horse. My dad was an equestrian rider when he was younger, so we had a horse when I was in my younger years. But those shopping dates, we would always go out to lunch at the Carnival, which was a very cute old restaurant that had red trays, and we'd get hamburgers and our chips and our dessert. And it was the same every single time. So you knew exactly what you're gonna get. Then we'd go downtown in Portland, Oregon to Pioneer Place, do our shopping there. Then we go up to Nordstrom's and we go over to Nike, which people might find weird, but my mom hated shopping. My dad loved it. He was a buyer at Nordstrom's when I think before I was born, especially I think in the shoe department. And so my dad kept me well styled and well dressed. Like that was how we stayed clothed, was that my dad would take us and we'd get to buy one thing usually. And so it was an opportunity though where it was one-on-one, and we got to chat, we got to talk about different things, and that then transitioned more into when I was getting older into dinner dates where my dad and he'd take me out once a week to this, of course, again, the same restaurant, we get the same food. It was definitely like my dad's MO was consistency and familiarity, which is what I needed at that age. I don't think when I got older and we'd go, I would try to find all the new places to take him, but I had to make sure they had bacon and scrambled eggs because that's all he would eat. So as long as they had his one plate, I was allowed to try different things. But the thing about him there was that I got to express everything that wasn't going very well. I think I've found as an older adult that this isn't as uncommon as I thought it was as a kid, but I didn't feel like I fit in at all. And I felt like everyone else had their place, and I was the one who was left out. And I remember my dad from a very early age would tell me, "You're just too mature for your age. Don't worry, they'll catch up to you." And I don't know that that was true or not, but it did make me feel seen and okay that okay, it's not bad. I just am at a different stage. And I do think there was some truth in the fact that I'm not only the youngest of my family, but at the time of all my extended family, and by quite a lot. And so I was with more adult figures and older people than me always. And so I think that's what he was speaking of when he meant maturity, is that I was more used to speaking at these higher elevated levels than necessarily to people of my own age or younger, because I didn't really have anyone who was younger around me until I started, babysitting or doing things again where I was more in the place of like uh, leading them or of power, that type of thing. So as a child, yeah, my dad was absolutely my best friend. He could do no wrong. I placed him on a pedestal. He was great. And I mean, I'm sure, yeah, there were things I know my mom or, other people didn't like about him, but that was not how I felt. But yeah, your other question about kind of some of the more challenging things is what I started learning when I got older and when I started noticing what we don't notice as kids. And I started, especially once my parents separated and then eventually got divorced, my dad was still there for me all the time. We still did our dinner dates. He picked me up. I had to have someone drive me to school for all of my schooling. And so he would pick me up in those first couple of years at exactly 8 a.m. every morning. He went to every single one of my soccer games. So he was very present in those ways. But as I started getting older, I saw patterns that I hadn't seen. And I didn't know that when we were little, he went to the bar after work every day before he came home. But there's no way I would have known that he was just coming home from work. And my dad didn't exhibit what I think a lot of media portrays as problems with alcohol, because he was still very much himself in my eyes, and wasn't abusive, wasn't loud or super emotional or kind of any of the different ways that we experience seeing those things. And so as I got older, though, I started seeing, especially because there was no drinking allowed in the house when I was little. So he didn't drink at home. He only drank maybe, he would always say, I'd only have two. And then I learned that two depends how much you pour into a glass of how many drinks that actually is. But as I got older, he did start drinking at home. So there were always nightcaps once he got home. And again, the behavior didn't really change a whole lot. My dad was pretty stoic and silent and very, after coming back from Ireland, very Irish, very much of his ancestry of, of doing that. And that's when I think the discomfort for me came was when I turned 21, and in the States, with that being the drinking age, I think he had been kind of waiting for me to be able to join him at the bar because we were such good buddies anyway. And so I was super excited for that, because what better place to be buddies with somebody than the bar? And from day one, I still don't know why, but I felt so uncomfortable. And my dad wasn't, again, abusive. He wasn't inappropriate. Like, my dad was a very buttoned up professional type of guy. But there was some sort of energetic shift that made me really uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's the time period where I remember coming back to my mom one day after meeting him at the bar and like sitting in the backyard with her and just in tears saying, like, I don't get it. Something's wrong. And thankfully, I think it's something she had known for quite some time. And she essentially said, let's get you into therapy. Like, let's have someone talk to you about this. That's not me. Um, and that's where, yeah, I sat in the therapist's office, explained what was going on. And he was the one who said to me, Corey, I think your dad's an alcoholic, which felt like it destroyed me.
Mm. Mm. And over time in that therapeutic relationship, did you come to have better understanding about why that was so uncomfortable for you from day one? Like, I'm curious how you conceive of that profound discomfort now, because I can imagine having been a person who my drinky dad didn't wait until I was in my 20s. He knew the bartender and the bar owner. I was in the bar when I was 12 or 13, and so I I get that there's like a pretty internalized deep shame because you know that it's wrong,
Mm.
and they're putting you in like the role of partner or the role of peer, and you're like, that's no, this is so wrong. If you can't say, like, how did you come to reconcile that profound discomfort that you carried in yourself? Was it something that you talked about with your dad?
Yeah, so that piece was really difficult because it was only my mom and I who were recognizing it. And when I tried to talk to other family members, it was kind of like, no, like, that's fine. And I think for a couple of family members, I've talked to them since, and it's been, well, I would have had to recognize myself how many I was having. Like, and if it's a problem for your dad, why is it not a problem for me? So a lot of that was a lot of silence. And then it made me wonder, well, am I just making this all up? I will say very quickly, I the therapist is great. I don't think it's the type of therapist I would see now, because essentially he right away was like, you need to build boundaries and you need to tell your dad you're not drinking with him, which I totally understand where he was coming from and all that. And I did it almost straight away. So I had a phone conversation with my dad that felt pretty devastating, where I told him, Dad, I think you have a problem with drinking, to which the response, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, was, oh, no, I don't. I could stop anytime. And it was like, okay, well, then will you not drink when we're together? And while he did that in the first year, um, when he and I were together solo, it didn't seem to hold up when we were with a group of people.
Hmm.
So if we were with the family, well, then he went back straight to drinking, because it wasn't him like him and I one
Mhm.
on one, and I would continue to not drink. So all of a sudden here I'm sitting here being like, well, why can't I drink? Um, and it took about a year for me to realize, thankfully, another really great thing about my dad, and a gift that he gave me and my sisters and all of his grandchildren, was the gift of unconditional love,
Mm.
which is also hard then to like put those two things together, of this problematic side, and yet this is the person who my whole entire life, even after I told him, I think you have a problem with alcohol, which was very uncomfortable, and was never addressed ever again. We
Mm.
never ever had any further conversation about it. He had no interest in like opening that door. Still remained connected and unconditionally loved me. It definitely disrupted our relationship. And there felt like there was a growing chasm the more I stood on this, like, you better change to prove that you
Mm.
love me. I think
Mm.
looking back now, that's what I was doing. I don't think in my therapy that I had been given the skills, that it's not my responsibility to save him.
Mm.
Because that's the other issue with my dad, even looking back now after doing some constellation therapy work. I had someone look at me and be like, you would have stepped in front of a car for your dad at the age of 6. Wouldn't you have? And I was like, absolutely. I'd still do it. Like, even though he's
Mm.
dead. And so there was pieces that I started unraveling here that were more ancestral and intergenerational, that I thought I was here to be my dad's protector and savior.
Mhm.
And so at that period of time when I told him that I thought he had a problem, I was also going to fix him, which,
Mhm.
for any of those who have done the work, no, that doesn't work very well.
And then what happened when he died? How was that handled by your family? How did that impact you at the time? How old were you?
So I was 30, 36, 37, I think, when he died. My dad was young. He was in his early 70s, and his father lived till he was in his 90s. This was not something that any of us had expected, to have a family member die that young. He also died in the almost identical fashion that his aunt did, who was also drinking quite heavily, not eating well. And so I think, again, there's some really interesting ancestral patterning there that we can see. My family had come around to understanding that my dad had a pretty severe issue with alcohol. And he, at the end of his life, I'd say the last 5 to 7 years were just a very slow decline, in which he became more and more homebound and unable to like walk very easily. And I know family and friends who were getting his bottles of alcohol for him started feeling really uncomfortable that they were helping him in that way. And when we got to his house, there's a chest that he had, and when we opened it, it was just full of bottles of alcohol. And so everyone had come around to it by that point in time. So this is, 15 or so years later. And it was also devastating because of many reasons. And I do know a lot of people will say, oh, what did your dad die from? And I'm like, well, it's not that easy of like, oh, well, he had cancer, or oh, he had a heart attack, or oh, this or that. But the alcoholism and poor diet and all of those pieces are really what kind of pushed that, the quickness of his decline on. And I know you mentioned being at the bar at the age of 12 or so. My dad was drinking at the age of 12. Like, my dad used the form of drinking really as disassociation. It was his therapy. There was a lot of depression he felt at the end of his life. And I kept thinking that I, almost got there with like, oh, but a therapist would be really good. And he'd be open one day. And by the time I came back the next with a number, the door was closed again. And so I know he was experiencing, yeah, a lot of pain at the end, and his death, yeah, just became really difficult in terms of the support and help he needed, which really landed on my sister, who still lived nearby, as well as my mom, which, while my parents were divorced, they had I think, a more beautiful relationship once they were divorced than the relationship I knew when I was in the home. And so, yeah, there was a lot of caretaking needed, which was very uncomfortable to my dad. He wanted to be an independent person, and that was slowly being a lot of different identities he had was being kind of stripped away from him in this end of life stage. And so, yeah, it was something I also felt like he wasn't necessarily ready for. And while
Mm.
he did come to kind of know it was imminent and that was going to be okay, I just also don't think, had he had the choice, that that's how he would have wanted it to end.
Hmm. What called you to connect with his spirit after he died then?
Yeah, I think I often think about when people die, kind of how to, connect with them and think about them. And I talk about it in the book of how you think about the movies or the books and those beautiful scenes of sitting at the graveyard and like having this like huge talk with the person. I was like, I don't think there's anything my dad and I didn't talk about. I was pretty like front up with him about different things. And so for me, it was just more this person had been so instrumental in my life, even at those end stages. My dad and I talked at least once a week on the phone. There was always a check-in. There was always, whether it was him checking on me or me checking on him. And so there was this big gap. And I was like, well, how are we going to check on each other? Because I don't like this. And at the time, I lived really far away. I lived in a different country on the other side. I was in Toronto, Canada at the time, and he had been in Portland, Oregon. And so I was trying to figure out how to honor his memory and was very perplexed by it because my dad had never been to Toronto. There wasn't really a space I could go, be like, oh, well, like even if it was a bar, like, oh, I'm going to go into the bar and have a water. Like, um, and I even going back to Portland, I only went back so often. So I only get to, visit X spot this amount of time. And if it's not really a spot I loved anyway, why would that be where I would connect best with him? So I was in my grief was really seeking out something. And then the number 23 started showing up incessantly everywhere. And I started telling everyone about it. I was like, this is weird. And I knew from the beginning it was my dad. I don't know why I knew that. And people would be like, oh, well, did he like Michael Jordan? Michael Jordan's number is 23. And I was like, I mean, he did, but no more than anyone else did. Um, and then even my mom was like, what do you mean 23 is like not an important number? That's my birthday. And I was like, well, I don't think he's coming for your birthday. Like, and so I didn't know why it was so incessant and intense and in my face constantly that I trusted and I knew. And it was a moment that when I was trying to still figure it out, I was like, okay, I see the number 23, that somehow these dates from when I was little popped back up into my mind. And I was like, okay, well, Toronto's not a forever home. So, like, what if I started up these dates again? What if I started going on dates with my dad on the 23rd of every month and just having that be our special time? Like, what might transcend if we do that? So, I feel like my dad definitely gave me a new calling card since we were always connected via the phone so much. This felt like our new calling card that whenever he wanted to put in a call to me, he'd throw that 23 out and I would know to respond and answer.
So, as somebody who has a scientific mind, was
Mm.
in academia, like how did you grapple with the kind of, I don't know, the cultural disdain we have for like woo-woo stuff, particularly in those environments, right? There's like a social scorn that comes with believing in angel numbers or thinking that you're getting signs. Like I think everybody would say, yeah, like the conversation at the grave, the grief, like yes, for sure, reaching out. But then to be like, I think he's pinging me. Like I think something's happening. How did you grapple with that?
Um, I mean, it's something I think I'd been grappling with for a long time. And I very thankfully, I worked at a university, a naturopathic and Chinese medicine university for a while, where I had to already blend science and more of, I mean, it's not total woo because all that is actually Western medicine as well. Although a lot of Western
Mhm.
people think it's woo. I'm like, okay, it's not. Um, so I think I'd been already in that frame and pushing back on that. I thankfully had found my people. So at the time I was doing my doctoral work, my PhD, and I thankfully had found my people, and we were already having ceremonies and spaces that um, it's definitely, kind of in the background. We weren't necessarily blasting it out, but I also had taken on a PhD dissertation project that was already pushing back against a little bit of this, but within a scientific realm. The methodology is called phenomenology, and it's of the lived experience. What is the lived experience? And so that's what I was going through in that moment. It was the lived experience of grief and bereavement and this number 23 coming. And so I chose more the scientific side of curiosity. Why? Like what's happening? And so in my undergrad, I did sociology. So even as kind of a sociological mindset of like, well, what's happening? What other people believe in this? What are they saying about it? How is this going? And I would start pointing it out to people too who were more of that critique of like, well, you're just making this up. I got a lot of this is the new car effect. Like once you decide you're going to buy, you know, that car, you see it everywhere you go. And I was like, sure. And multiply it by 23. That's what this is. So I started pointing it out to everyone who was around me too. And one of the people who I felt like, I was like, I don't know that my mom really believes me. And I pointed out to her all the time. And she was the one when I called her this one day of like these three emails landing that were like so incredibly exciting and powerful. And at the end of that, that's when she said to me, well, you know what today is, right? And I was like, oh God, someone's birthday. Did I forget? Like, oh, what did I miss? And I finally said to her, I was like, I don't know, Mom, it's Thursday. Like, what else? She was like, it's the 23rd. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so to have someone who already, I didn't really feel like was even believing me, be the one to then put it back to me was this like massive sparkle of kind of connection. And it was in that moment that I was like, oh, it is. It's totally him. And he was preparing me for this moment. And so I still see that when he starts to send them rapidly, I always know to pause and to watch what's coming and to be mindful and again curious of what's happening. So there's definitely moments where it starts to get really loud and intense, or, sometimes it's even softer. And so I just know he's kind of like putting his hand on my shoulder, but there's different rhythms that I've started being able to pick up in. And so again, to me, that's a scientific mind.
Mm.
It's the openness and the curiosity. So whoever comes with like kind of that closed set, oh, you're just making it up. Oh, you're just doing this. I'm like, you're not a very good scientist. Like, where's your curiosity? Like, and again, my offering too is okay, let's just say I'm making it all up. Let's say I've 100%, my mind has creating this. Who am I hurting? No
Mm.
one. Who is this being made better for? Well, me. And I can
Mm.
promise you a lot of other people around me who are watching it with me.
Mm.
So if I'm doing no one harm and it's creating meaning making and sense making to me, what is your problem with me having this connection? Like to me, I'm always like, maybe you need to look at what's going on with you right now and where your defensiveness is coming up and why it's grabbing you in a way that you want to prove to me that I'm wrong.
Mm. So what kind of dates did you take your dad on, and what happened? Like what happened after you did 23 dates with him?
For sure. Our first date was actually a date in honor of him because I said earlier that he was an equestrian rider. And my friend, when I was telling her that I had this idea and I wanted to go on dates, she was like, well, you know about the horse and dog rescue out in Toronto, right? And I was like, no, tell me more. And so that was our first date. And again, a lot of these dates were more given to me. And so that was me keeping my eyes open and that he was participating in them. I will say when I went on it, especially this first one, I thought I kind of felt him by the horses and then it like all went silent. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like
Mm.
what's supposed to happen here? And then I was like, well, should I be like, again, as a scientist research, should I be like typing this out and like
Mm.
noting every feeling I'm having? And I just like remember, it was a really nice day out on the farm and I got back into the car and I was a bit crestfallen because I was like, well, where was he? Like, why didn't this work? And as I was driving home, I noticed I was in a car share and the gas tank went below when I needed to fill it up. And so I was like, oh gosh, I need a gas station. And all of a sudden I look up, there's a gas station and the gas price is 123 a liter. And I was like, oh, there you are. Like there it is. And afterwards, as I got back in the car, I started looking at every single gas station as I went, and not a single other gas station was priced at that point. And I was like, okay, like I see you. And then we passed by a street name that was a street that I grew up on with him. And I was like, whoa, that's interesting. I haven't seen that street name out here. And all of a sudden I felt his whole presence and him looking over and being like, I've been here the whole time. Like
Mm.
you just calmed down enough to like see me and feel me.
Mm.
So that one was great. I went to Broadway with him, where a friend asked me, oh, did your dad love Broadway? And I was like, no, he absolutely hated it. He thought it was the worst thing in the world. But he's dead. He doesn't always get to choose. There were definitely, yeah, there's road trips. There were also just times of as the dates went on, I also then, what I haven't mentioned yet is that we went into the pandemic and things got real sticky. And all these awesome dates I had planned very much turned upside down on their head. And I had to figure out a new way of doing them. And in the midst of all of that, I moved across the country in the pandemic by myself, mainly to be closer to family who was on the West Coast, but in the US, which was funny because the border was closed. So I wasn't really any closer to them because I couldn't get over the border. But I moved to Vancouver, and only I think less than 2 months after I got here, ended up having pure double vision and a pretty scary moment of something being pretty severely wrong with me. And so that's when our dates very much shifted again into what happens when the whole entire world kind of goes dark in multiple ways, not just the pandemic, but even my vision of being able to see around me. And so my dad started accompanying me to different types of doctor's appointments. One of my dates that I love the most was in the MRI when he not only showed up, but he brought all my ancestors with him.
Mm.
And we had a dance party because
Mm.
MRIs are very loud and very, it's like a rave in there. It's quite,
Mm.
if you're not too scared, it can be quite fun once you get comfortable.
Mm.
But yeah, they then transformed into treatment that I needed to get, which took me around the world. And so the dates very much morphed and shifted, just like the progression of my own childhood into my teenage years and into adulthood, where his and my relationship also changed. And so that's one of the profound things I think about the dates is they weren't static. They really moved and transformed as I got older, and they continue to. So the book is only 23 dates that I share from these more early years, but my dad and I still go on dates here and there. It's not every single month, um, but it's now an adult relationship
Mm.
where we kind of figure out when we want to do it. It doesn't have to be on the 23rd. And it can also just be me making his favorite taco salad and having dinner with him or inviting him into conversation or into meditation with me. So,
Mm. So, what do you feel is universal about your story that made it important for you to write this book?
well, I think grief is universal and it doesn't always come with death. Or it doesn't come, maybe what I mean by that is with the death of a loved one. It can be the death of a lot of things. It can be the death of a job that you had loved, or of a period of life that you had, or a completion of something. And so a piece of this, I will say, when I first had the idea of writing the book, it was very much in my mind that this was going to be a very fun kind of beach ready, like about grief and death, but like, oh my gosh, look, her dad shows up and he's dead and she talks to him. And it would literally just be the dates. Like that's kind of what it was. And as Co-Spirit was my co-writer, my co-author, they had very, very different plans for me. They didn't like that idea. So there was very much, a piece of, the universality of this and speaking to what a lot of people were going through. So again, we all went through the pandemic together, and there was quite a lot of grief energetically throughout the world for lots of different reasons at that moment. And so I think there's a piece of weaving there that not only talks about the grief and bereavement when someone you love dies, but also my experience of my diagnosis of multiple sclerosis during this point in time. It also deeply dives into ancestral trauma and intergenerational trauma and how these dates, because I listened and because I followed, led me down a path of healing. I mentioned the date where my ancestors showed up, and that was the first moment where it was all my dad's paternal line that was there in the MRI, and my grandfather stood up in front of that family and said to me, well, your MS is from us. It's because it's from our family. And I said, no, 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 no. It's my mom's family who has autoimmune. Like I already had an autoimmune disease. It's all like kind of mapped out genetically. From what I know, I don't know of much autoimmune from my dad's side. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, right, right, right. My dad's mom had Parkinson's. And so I was like, oh, okay, like neurodegenerative disease, totally. And he goes, no, us. And looks back at his family. And my grandma's not there because that's the maternal side. And I was like, I don't get it. Like, what do you mean? And he was like, it's from us. And then he kept telling me, it's going to be a hard journey, but you're going to be just fine. And he kept repeating it. And it was something that I carried with me. And he showed up a few more times. And like, I think about a year and a half later, he showed up again. And in part of the book, I speak about it as well, where he said, again, don't forget it's from us. And I was like, I still don't get it. Like, why? And that's the other thing that you'll get to figure out in the book is that 23. Why is a 23 showing up over and over again? And so this is a part of the journey and a part of the discovery of what is the 23 and why. And it took me, goodness gracious, 2.5, 3+ years to finally put two and two together and figure out what was going on and why that was the calling card number and what I was supposed to do about that. But yeah, even at the last date is my own ancestral healing journey to Ireland. And the stories and the people I met and the way that all transpires, I think is also a really beautiful opportunity for people to either see their own story, their own desires of what they maybe could go seek out. I also feel that I'm not writing a book of how to date your dead people. However, you might like to take inspiration and date your dead people. But it's more an offering of how I used creativity within my grief and an invitation for anyone looking to do the same, that just follow the signs. They'll lead you to what is meant for you and for that process.
Well, and given that the world continually serves us up reasons to be griefy or ragey, creativity sounds really useful. These days, how are you coping with grief and rage?
Yeah. The beautiful thing for me with grief is that from childhood, I was definitely the crier, which I've been told the babies are the criers of the family. My mom was also one of the youngest of her family, so she cried all the time. And so she would tell me that she would always say to me when I'd cry, don't worry, tears cleanse the soul, which was I think an indigenous proverb. So from a young age, I was encouraged to cry, to let it out. So with my grief, I feel quite comfortable in terms of exploring what is rising up for me, how that may be. I will say I am still in process with rage. That was not something that was encouraged as a young child. It was more to be grateful and to change that over and to be okay with it. And so I will say that I have learned some great skills from the Numinous Network and love being in those sessions with folks there. Tremoring is a huge way of releasing for me. I think often too, because I don't have to talk about it. I think as a scientist and researcher, when I start to talk about things, I get really in my head and I get I'm really good at getting disassociated from the feeling, which I want to honor with my dad and his alcoholism. That was his disassociation. I have mine too. And I know that and I see that. I think mine have been given awards and pats on the back and told how great they are. They're also what made me really sick. And so recognizing that and trying to figure out ways to heal, such as bringing in rage. I still remember that same therapist that had told me about my dad. I went back to him with one of my first autoimmune conditions where I had red, angry joints. And he said, well, aren't you mad about losing the ability to walk? Aren't you mad about being sick? And I said, oh no, I'm learning so many good lessons. This is really important. To which he said, well, it sure looks like your body is angry and it's releasing all of your anger for you. So I've learned physically what happens when I don't release rage or anger. And that has been a beautiful lesson. My body is very smart and knows that I often don't listen when it gives me lots of clues, and that it will, for example, make me lose the ability to walk, make me lose the ability to see things because it needs me to stand still and stop and feel. And so until I do the healing work, that doesn't really, I don't get released from those moments. And so at this stage of my life, I am doing all I can to not have to relive them in the physicality of it. Although I do see it as a gift, I will say I'm still angry and mad about it sometimes now because it's not very fun and it doesn't feel very fair. But I also, when I'm out of those situations, can see the beauty and wisdom in my body. And so, yeah, tremoring is a big way I release. I'm also really good at going into my car when no one else is there and yelling very loud and being very angry. So that's another way that I honor and acknowledge, and that I don't have to be the one. I will say I'm very good at anger and rage when it's for anybody else. So these are techniques I'm learning to be angry and acknowledge myself. That's the place where I usually fall down a bit more. And so I find when I can do it more in the silences and spaces where spirit is with me rather than necessarily doing it in front of others, uh, is a way that I acknowledge and move with it.
Well, thank you so much also for the creativity of writing this book. And it was a total page turner. It was like such a great memoir. It was awesome. And I'm really excited to get a hard copy in my hot little hands. So thank you so much for sharing it with us and for sharing your story here on the podcast, but also with the wider world. I'm sure it'll be inspiring and also super just interesting for anybody who's interested in ancestral healing work, and even like people who are into, mediumship, who are like, yes, I'm totally into this. It's like, this is a nice story. It's a really good story. And also people who are grieving, who, even if they don't necessarily already believe that they can connect with their beloveds, want to believe. There was a lot of charm in your story. So thank you for sharing it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all your support. And yeah, I really hope that folks, I very purposefully on the cover have PhD after my name, and right under it is co-written with Spirit. So my hope is to build those bridges for both sides of the aisle of whoever may resonate and wants to feel a bit of validation or even curiosity Do you want to see some magic in the world? I sure hope you do. I love seeing it.
Thanks for being on the show, Corey.
Thanks so much, Carmen. I appreciate it.
So special. Love that story. And as I said, it was a total page turner. Corey's book is now available through all the usual channels, and the audiobook is arriving on January 23rd, naturally. I will put links in the show notes, and I hope that even just taking small little steps like this, planting those seeds, these are like little prayers. Listening today, buying the book, asking your ancestors for signs, maybe making a little ancestral shrine or altar. I hope all of these little things add up to more magic in your days, especially through the holiday season this year. And if you'd like to devote some time each day through the Yuletide season to connecting with your ancestors and angels, one thing you could do is join us for our half hour of altar time each day in the Numinous Network. From winter solstice on December 21st through New Year's Day on January 1st. We're meeting each day at 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Pacific to light our candles on our altars and do a brief guided meditation to connect with the spirit and the spirits and the themes of the winter season. So join us in the Numinous Network. Learn more at carmenspanyola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.